That's him. There's something off about that man with the little girl.
Dan Harris, a security staff member at the mall who has over a decade of police experience, felt alarm bells ringing in his mind. With just a quick glance in the mall restroom, the man's unusually nervous demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the little girl's innocent look. This moment, like a pebble dropped into a calm lake, set off rippling waves. Hey everyone, welcome to Worldly Whispers. Let's get started. Dan Harris, a 38-year-old with over a decade of police experience, now finds himself on mall security duty at the Rivergate Mall for the past 3 months. This sprawling complex, connected to the busy Rivergate Central Station, buzzes with life, especially in the morning with its family-friendly indoor play areas. On this particular day, as Dan arrives at the mall, he checks his watch. It's 8:45 a.m., and his shift starts at 9:00 a.m. He heads to the security station, where he stands in front of his locker, adjusting his uniform meticulously. In his line of work, presentation is key, as it builds confidence and earns respect. When he goes to use the restroom before the shift, he discovers a long line of mall staff and fellow security personnel at the employee restroom. Knowing he can't be late for the morning briefing, he makes a quick decision to use the customer restroom in the shopping area, despite it being a fair distance away. As he enters the customer restroom, he's surprised to find a black man and a little white girl with blonde hair. The man freezes when he sees Dan in his uniform. He tells the girl to wait and enters the stall alone. Dan, who has been trained to notice subtle details, picks up on the man's tense body language, a slight tensing of the shoulders, and a barely perceptible widening of the eyes. The girl, oblivious to the tension, smiles brightly at Dan and chirps a friendly hi. Dan responds kindly and moves to an empty stall. As he's in the stall, he can't help but think about the situation. It seems odd, but he doesn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe the man is the girl's father or guardian, despite their different appearances. When Dan finishes and steps out to wash his hands, the man is already at the sink. Their eyes meet briefly in the mirror, and Dan feels an inexplicable tension in the air. The man seems uncomfortable and quickly takes the girl's hand, leading her out of the restroom. Dan is left with a nagging feeling as he exits the restroom himself. He catches a glimpse of the pair heading towards the mall's atrium, where there's a popular playground. He tries to shake off the feeling, telling himself he's probably overreacting, but it persists. He then hurries back to the security office, but he's late for the morning briefing. When he enters the briefing room, all eyes turn to him. Sergeant Michaels, a stern-faced woman in her mid-50s, gives him a disapproving stare. Dan apologizes, takes the only empty seat, and tries to focus on the briefing about a shoplifting ring targeting electronic stores. However, his mind keeps wandering back to the man and the girl in the restroom. After the briefing, Sergeant Michaels calls him aside. She asks if everything is okay, and Dan hesitates. He doesn't want to mention the incident in the restroom, as he has no solid evidence of any wrongdoing, just a gut feeling. He tells her he lost track of time in the restroom, and it won't happen again. Dan then goes to the staff room to get some coffee. The coffee in the pot is overcooked and bitter, but he needs the caffeine to clear his head. As he sips the acrid brew, he looks out of the window, overlooking the mall's main concourse. He sees the early morning bustle starting to pick up, but his eyes are drawn to the direction of the atrium where he last saw the man and the girl. He can't help but wonder if they're still there. Dan finishes his coffee and decides it's time to start his patrols. He checks his radio to make sure it's on and set to the correct channel. As he steps out into the mall proper, the climate-controlled air hits him, and he can smell the aroma of fresh coffee and pastries from the food court. He begins his rounds, greeting the familiar faces among the shoppers and employees. Even as he goes through the motions of his usual routine, his feet seem to carry him towards the main atrium. He tells himself that checking the playground area is part of his job, but deep down, he knows he's hoping to see the man and the girl again. As he approaches the atrium, he hears the laughter of children. The playground is starting to fill up with families. Dan's eyes scan the colorful play structures, and then he spots them. The little girl, Anna, is perched on a play pony, giggling as it rocks back and forth. The man stands behind her, pushing the pony gently. From a distance, they look like any other parent and child enjoying a morning at the mall. Dan slows down, trying to appear casual as he observes them. Anna's laughter rings out, and the man chases her around the pony. There's nothing obviously suspicious in their interaction. However, when Anna notices Dan and waves enthusiastically, saying, "Hello again, officer," the man's demeanor changes dramatically. The playful expression vanishes, replaced by a tense and wary look. His eyes dart around, avoiding Dan's gaze, and his body language shows discomfort. This stark contrast to Anna's friendliness makes Dan's earlier suspicions resurface. Before Dan can decide whether to approach them, a commotion catches his attention. Anna has fallen off the play pony and is sprawled on the floor. Dan rushes to her side, his training kicking in. He asks if she's okay. Anna sits up slowly, with a small cut on her lip, but she bravely says she's fine. Dan looks at the man, who is hovering nearby, but doesn't crouch down to check on Anna. Instead, he seems to be looking around as if searching for help. Dan offers to get first aid kit, but the man quickly shakes his head, saying it's just a small bruise and they should be going anyway. Before Dan can respond, the man helps Anna to her feet and starts leading her away. As they leave, a small hair clip on the carpet catches Dan's eye. He picks it up and jogs after them, calling out that they dropped it. The girl's face lights up when she sees the hair clip and reaches out for it, but the man seems less pleased with Dan's involvement. When the girl asks the man to put the clip in her hair, Dan notices that the man struggles with this simple task. This small detail adds to Dan's growing list of concerns. Dan decides to probe a bit further and asks if the man is Anna's father. The man hesitates before replying that he is. He also explains that they were heading home after Anna's preschool class, but she asked to play on the pony. Anna then tugs at the man's sleeve, saying she wants to play on the pony again. The man firmly refuses, saying they need to catch the train in 15 minutes. As they walk away, Dan strains to hear their conversation. He thinks he hears Anna ask, "Home where?" which deepens his suspicions. Watching them disappear into the crowd, Dan decides to trust his instincts. Something is definitely off, and he heads back to the security station. There, he boots up his computer and accesses the database of recent suspects and wanted individuals. He tries to recall every detail of the man's appearance and enters the information into the search bar. As the computer processes his request, Dan thinks about all the odd things that have happened. The man's nervousness, his struggle with the hair clip, and Anna's strange question. These details together paint a worrying picture. A soft ping from the computer pulls Dan's attention back. Several results pop up, and among them, one thumbnail seems to be a close match. He clicks on the file, and his heart skips a beat when he sees the face of Malcolm Reed. The list of charges associated with Reed's name, all related to crimes against children, makes Dan realize the gravity of the situation. Somewhere in the mall, an innocent girl is with a known child predator. Dan quickly stands up, catching the attention of Lisa, a fellow officer. He briefly explains what he has observed and what he has just discovered about Malcolm Reed. Lisa's eyes widen, and she suggests checking the CCTV footage to track them down if they're still in the mall. Dan and Lisa hurry to the surveillance room. The room is dimly lit, with walls lined with monitors showing various parts of the mall. 3 officers are on duty, attentively scanning the screens for any signs of trouble. Dan quickly tells them about the man and the young girl, describing Malcolm and Anna in detail and emphasizing the urgency of finding them. The officers immediately spring into action, their fingers flying over the keyboards as they rewind and fast forward through the footage from different cameras. Minutes pass, and for Dan, it feels like hours. He watches the screens intently, his heart pounding. Then, Lisa suddenly points to one of the monitors and exclaims that she has found them. The screen shows Malcolm and Anna stepping into an elevator, heading down towards the central station. Dan doesn't waste a second. He grabs his radio and broadcasts a message to his colleagues stationed in the station area. He describes Malcolm's appearance and tells them that he is accompanied by a young blonde girl, and to approach with caution as it's a possible child abduction in progress. He turns to Lisa, his expression determined and concerned. He asks her to come with him to the central station. As they wait for the elevator, Dan tells Lisa that they should split up when they get down there to cover more ground, and that she should radio him immediately if she spots them, and not approach unless necessary. Lisa nods in agreement. When the elevator arrives at the station level, They step out into the busy central station. The noise hits them first, a chaotic mix of announcements, conversations, and the rumble of approaching trains. The air is filled with the smell of fast food from nearby kiosks and the musty odor of the underground. Dan and Lisa start searching the crowd. Dan takes the south end, while Lisa heads towards the north end, maintaining radio contact. Dan moves through the station methodically, checking each platform, looking into shops, and carefully observing every adult child pair he sees. As the minutes tick by, Dan's anxiety grows. He wonders if they have already left the station or if they have boarded a train. Just as he is about to radio Lisa for an update, he spots Malcolm and Anna. Malcolm is at a kiosk, seemingly topping up a travel card, and Anna is standing beside him, looking around curiously. Dan's breath catches in his throat. They are only about 50 feet away. He approaches them carefully, trying not to draw attention. He can see that Malcolm's hands are shaking slightly as he inserts money into the machine, and Anna is fidgeting, clearly bored with waiting. When Anna turns and sees Dan, her face lights up and she waves enthusiastically. Malcolm's head snaps up at the sound of Anna's voice. Their eyes meet, and in that instant, Dan sees recognition and fear flash across Malcolm's face. Before Dan can say anything, Malcolm bolts, pushing through the crowd and leaving Anna standing alone and confused. Anna calls out Dad, but her voice is lost in the noise of the station. Dan's training kicks in immediately. He keys his radio, reporting that the suspect is on the run, heading towards Platform 3, and that all units should converge. He also tells them that the child is safe but alone near the ticket kiosks. He turns to Anna, crouching down to her level. He tells her to stay right there and that another officer will come to look after her while he goes to catch her dad. Without waiting for a response, Dan sprints after Malcolm, weaving through startled passengers. He hears Lisa's voice in the distance, greeting Anna, and he glances over his shoulder, relieved to see that she is safe. Then, he focuses on Malcolm again. He spots Malcolm ahead, turning into a corner as he frantically searches for an escape route. Dan quickly radios for backup, alerting all guards in the station to stay on high alert. Malcolm is fast, but Dan is determined. He sees Malcolm pushing people aside as he runs. Suddenly, Malcolm finds himself cornered, with all exits blocked by security personnel responding to Dan's call. For a moment, it seems like Malcolm might attempt to jump onto one of the trains pulling into the station, but before he can make a move, Dan closes the distance between them with a burst of speed. He tackles Malcolm to the ground, the impact knocking the wind out of both of them. Dan quickly recovers and pulls Malcolm's arms behind his back, securing them with handcuffs. He says firmly, "Malcolm Reed, you're under arrest for child-related crimes and attempted kidnapping." As Dan pulls Malcolm to his feet, he feels a mix of relief and anger. He is relieved that they have stopped whatever Malcolm had planned, but he is angry at the thought of what might have happened if they hadn't intervened. With Malcolm secured, Dan begins to lead him back through the station. A crowd of onlookers has gathered. As they walk, Dan's mind turns to Anna. He hopes that Lisa has found her and that she is safe. There are still many questions to be answered, but for now, the immediate danger has passed. The town's police department is bustling with activity as Dan enters, firmly guiding the handcuffed Malcolm Reed through the corridors. The fluorescent lights are harsh, casting sharp shadows on the faces of his colleagues who are observing the aftermath of the chase. Dan hands Malcolm over to two waiting officers, instructing them to take him to interrogation room 2 and saying he'll be there shortly. As Malcolm is led away, the adrenaline that had been coursing through Dan's veins begins to subside, leaving him feeling exhausted. He looks around the office for Lisa and Anna. He spots them in a quiet corner. Lisa is crouching down next to Anna, speaking to her in soft, soothing tones. Anna's face is tear-stained, and her small body is shaking slightly as the events of the day catch up with her. Dan approaches them slowly, not wanting to startle Anna. When he gets close, Lisa looks up, relief evident in her eyes. "Dan," she says, standing up, "good work out there." Dan nods in acknowledgement, and then turns his attention to Anna. Crouching down to her level, he says gently, "Hey there, Anna, do you remember me from the mall?" Anna nods, her blue eyes wide and uncertain. "You're the nice officer," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Dan smiles warmly. That's right. I'm Officer Dan. Can you tell me how you're feeling right now? Anna's lower lip trembles slightly. I'm scared, she admits. Where's my dad? The innocence in her question tugs at Dan's heart. He exchanges a glance with Lisa, silently conveying the delicacy of the situation. How can one explain to a child that the person she trusted was not really her father? Anna, Dan says gently, his voice calm and steady. The man you were with. We believe he's not really your dad. Can you tell me if that's true? Anna's brows furrow in confusion. I don't know. He said he promised to be my daddy. He said he was going to take me home. Dan's heart tightens, but he keeps his tone even. So he's not your real dad. Is that right? Anna hesitates, then nods slowly. No, but he promised. Dan takes a deep breath, softening his voice even more. Sometimes, Anna, there are people who say things that aren't true. They pretend to be someone they're not. The man you were with, he was pretending. Tears well up in Anna's eyes. But he was so nice to me. He bought me ice cream and played with me in the mall. Lisa interjects gently. Sweetie, can you tell us where you met this man? Were you with your real family before? Anna shakes her head, a few tears spilling over onto her cheeks. I don't have a real family. I live at the orphanage, but I don't like it there. It's scary and old, and there are mice. Dan and Lisa exchange another look, one of concern and understanding. The situation is becoming clearer, but it's no less heartbreaking. Anna, Dan says softly, can you tell us more about the orphanage? Why did you leave? The little girl sniffles, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. It's so small and dark. All the kids were getting sick. They had to close the playroom because of the mice and bugs. I just want to go somewhere nice with toys and lights. As Anna speaks, Dan feels a mix of emotions. There's anger at the conditions that drove a child to trust a stranger, sadness for the vulnerability that Malcolm Reed had exploited, and a growing determination to ensure that Anna and children like her are protected. So you came to the mall? Dan prompts gently. Anna nods, her small voice barely above a whisper. It's so big and bright here. There are toys to play with, and it's always warm. She pauses, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. When the mall closed, I slept in the train station. That's where I met Dad him. Her voice falters, and fresh tears well up, spilling down her cheeks as she lowers her gaze to the floor. Dan reaches out, placing a comforting hand on Anna's shoulder. You're very brave, Anna. Thank you for telling us all this. We're going to make sure you're safe now. Lisa stands up, touching Dan's arm to get his attention. We need to contact child services, she says in a low voice. And the orphanage needs to be investigated. Dan nods in agreement. I'll make the calls. Can you stay with Anna? Maybe get her something to eat and drink. As Lisa leads Anna to a more comfortable area of the office, Dan pulls out his phone. His finger hovers over the keypad for a moment before he makes a decision. Instead of calling the standard child services number, he scrolls through his contacts and selects a name, Aaron Harris. The phone rings twice before a familiar voice answers. Dan, this is unexpected. Everything okay? Aaron asks. Dan's relief is evident in his voice as he hears his sister. I need your help. We got a situation here at the mall, and I think your expertise as a social worker could be invaluable. Quickly and concisely, Dan explains the events of the day, from his first encounter with Anna and Malcolm in the restroom to the chase through the station. He can hear Aaron's sharp intake of breath as he describes Anna's situation and the conditions at the orphanage. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Aaron says, her voice filled with professional determination. Don't let anyone from Standard Child Services take her before I get there. We need to handle this carefully. Thanks, sis, Dan says, gratitude evident in his voice. I owe you one. As he ends the call, Dan feels a small weight lift from his shoulders. With Aaron's help, he is confident they can ensure Anna's safety and well-being. But there is still the matter of Malcolm Reed to deal with. Dan makes his way to interrogation room 2, pausing outside the door to collect his thoughts. He knows that whatever happens in that room could have far-reaching consequences, not just for Malcolm, but potentially for other children who might have fallen victim to his schemes. Taking a deep breath, he opens the door and steps inside, ready to confront the man who had nearly succeeded in abducting an innocent child. The interrogation room is small and gloomy. Malcolm Reed sits at the metal table, handcuffed. His earlier bravado has gone, replaced by a sullen look. Dan enters and starts the interrogation. He lists Malcolm's crimes, but Malcolm remains silent. Dan presses him about the number of children he's targeted. At the mention of Anna, Malcolm shows a brief reaction. Dan tries to persuade him to cooperate, emphasizing it will help during sentencing. However, Malcolm asks for a lawyer. Just as Dan is about to leave, Malcolm stops him and starts to confess. He admits to targeting 4 children, including Anna, and gives the address of a house where they might be. Dan immediately sends a team to the address and continues talking to Malcolm, making him understand his actions were wrong. Then, Dan leaves to update his superiors and coordinate the operation. In the office, Dan sees Erin has arrived. She's with Anna and Lisa. Dan approaches and tells Anna they'll help other children too. Away from Anna, he shares Malcolm's confession with Erin. Erin is concerned about the children and the state of Anna's orphanage. Dan decides to focus on Anna's comfort for now. Erin shows Anna other orphanages on a tablet, but Anna says she wants to go back to her old one. She's scared of the new places as she doesn't know anyone there. Dan and Erin understand her fear. Dan promises to sponsor Anna and asks her to call him if she has any problems. Erin will also check on her regularly. They then head to the orphanage. The place looks run down. When they enter, Miss Agnes, the caretaker, is relieved to see Anna. Dan and Erin talk to Miss Agnes about the conditions. The playroom is in a mess, and Miss Agnes explains they lack funds for repairs. Dan decides to sponsor Anna and help renovate the bedrooms. He also plans to reach out to the community for more support. Erin suggests making a video to raise awareness. Miss Agnes is hopeful. Before leaving, Dan gives Anna his card with his number, promising to visit and take her to the mall. As they walk to the car, Erin jokes that Dan might end up fostering Anna. Dan just smiles, ready to face the challenges ahead to ensure Anna and other children are safe and well cared for.
If this story touched you, show your support by liking and subscribing. Your encouragement helps us keep sharing memorable stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.